Here on the bench, I'm reassembling the Elnix, and so far I've refitted on the dial side the keyless works and the calendar works and the cam pinion, minute wheel, hour wheel, etc. Having fitted the train bridge, I'd realised that I'd forgotten a component, and it was this component here with this little pin that you can see moving like so, and that's the steel plate which sits underneath. The train of wheels then goes on top of that, and this bears against that shepherd's crook spring, the larger one that you saw me remove in the previous video. So I'm just going to scoot in and show you this up close. So just up close, first of all, you can see a tiny amount of corrosion on the edge there. This is battery acid corrosion from a previous leaking battery, and some of the plating underneath has been worn away, but it's just the brass coloured plating on the top, the gold coloured plating, that's worn away. The rest of it underneath is in good order. It's just the plating, and obviously, thankfully, that's not particularly visible. Certainly not without removing the plate, but you can see, hopefully you can see there where the battery acid has eaten away a little bit of the plate. But with that out of the way, that's otherwise it's in very good order, really. It's not bad at all. This piece down here, which you can see pivots there, you can just see the tail of the shepherd's crook spring down there, which bears against the wheel-shaped portion here, and this is a brake which acts against the large drum-shaped portion of what would be the second wheel, which is here. And like when it's like so, it will actually stop the motion of the wheels. And this I wanted to mention because on the reassembly, I'd originally fitted the train of wheels and this bridge, and then realised I'd forgotten to fit this part, so I had to take that apart again, fit this plate, and then I was struggling to refit the train of wheels before realising that this was actually pushing the second wheel out of alignment. So this has to be held back under spring tension. Fit the train of wheels, fit the bridge, and get everything aligned and moving before you can release this and tighten the screws in the train bridge. So for anybody that's actually rebuilding one of these, do bear that in mind, that this particular bit will cause you some difficulty, and you need to be able to physically hold that back somehow and stop that breaking the drum on the second wheel, because that will actually push it out of alignment and make it incredibly difficult to get this top pivot in here. Back here with the pallets installed, and first of all, I need to say a thank you to Adrian Vierhelst. Apologies if I've not pronounced that correctly, but he's a young fella who is on one of the watch groups, or well, a couple of the watch groups that I frequent, and I know he does have some experience in working on Timex electric watches, which work, I believe, on the same principle. And it was reading a reply of his to somebody on one of the threads where I posted some images about the incredibly long pallet fork jewels and the oddly shaped escape wheel. And it wasn't until I read this reply that I started sort of taking a bit more notice of the setup of this. And initially I thought, I'm a little bit baffled as to why it seems to have very long, thin pallet fork jewels, because logically you would assume that they'd be quite fragile. And on his reply he mentioned that it's because on the electric watches, it's actually the pallets that's driving the movement, or rather the balance, which, when you think about it, does make perfect sense. So thank you for mentioning that, and I'm just hopefully going to demonstrate how that works in this part here. So the balance wheel has permanent magnets affixed, and there's an electrical coil which generates field, which drives the balance and allows it to oscillate back and forth like a conventional balance would. Now, in a conventional one, a barrel would be sitting here and it would be pushing power through the train down to the pallets, and it would be the escape wheel that was creating an impulse on the pallet fork, and then as the balance swings round and the pallet fork engages and disengages, the push from the train onto the escape wheel would be generating that impulse for the balance. In this case, the battery and the magnets are generating the impulse for the balance. That in turn is swinging your pallet fork here, and it's swinging it back and forth. And if you observe what happens with this, because it has this little ratcheting system here, this spring, this bears onto the notched part on top of the escape wheel, and it prevents that escape wheel from moving backwards. You have to adjust this little spring, as I discovered, because I'd taken this off to investigate it. So having refitted it, I've had to adjust it a little bit. So you have to unscrew this screw and adjust the plate a little, and then you can turn this section here to adjust the depthing and mesh of the little spring. And this makes sure that it doesn't have too much backlash, and it allows the wheel to lock in such a manner that as this moves, the pallet fork engages with the long sloping piece, like so, pushing the escape wheel round and eventually dropping fully into that slot. As the balance comes back round, it does exactly the same on the other pallet fork jewel. So if you watch each one in turn, you can actually see how that drives the pallet, how the pallets drive the escape wheel rather, and that shows how it drives the escape wheel and in turn the third wheel, second wheel, and the fourth wheel, which is under here. It's slightly confusing actually, because the second wheel, normally the third wheel drives against the fourth wheel, but in this case it's what would technically be the second wheel. It's all a little bit confusing. I've not looked at the ratios of the gear teeth or what have you, but hopefully you can see what I mean there. And this is as fascinating for me as I hope it is for you, because this is all new to me. And as you can see, this is moving round. That little spring detent is stopping the escape wheel from moving backwards and stopping the pallet fork from doing its job. And as this drives around, it drives the remainder of the train around, and thereby driving the movement. I'm here with the rebuild of the Elnix. I've actually got it running, and I've tweaked it a little bit and regulated it and tried to even out the regulation and the positions, and I've got it reasonable. Not 100% happy with it, but given its age and given the hairspring needed a bit of talking to, it's not bad. I'm quite happy with that. It's running away nicely down here, as you can see. This is the dial side, and I'm rebuilding the dial side here. And this bit that I'm fitting down here is actually the balance stop, the hack, as it were. And this is not particularly visible with well, it's not visible at all with the date wheel and everything on there. So I just wanted to pause for a moment and show how this operates. So I'm going to zoom in. We've got the setting lever here, and then this plate. This is actually two plates. If I can just remove this upper one down here, if I can get my tweezers under there and pick that up. I'm sort of stood up looking at the screen and trying to remove this, but you can see there this is composed of two plates. This one has a pin that locates into there and fits on there, and this engages with another lever which operates the quick day date change, but that's not what we're looking at here, so I'm just going to take that out of the way for the moment. And this part here that engages with the bottom of the setting lever down here is the balance stop. There's a pin at the end of this S-shaped sprung steel section, and when I pull out the balance, when I pull out the stem like so, you can see how that moves and engages just like a normal mechanical watch would, and that's obviously where it would engage the teeth to set the day and date. And then when you pull it out to the second stop for time setting, you can see that the pin engages with and stops dead at the balance wheel. You then push it back in and off it goes again, just like so. And that's how the hack or the balance stop system works on the Elnix. So at this point here, I recorded this but completely forgot to switch on my lav mic, and as a result you cannot hear anything I'm saying, and I am trying to remember what I was saying, so my apologies for that, and hopefully this little voiceover will help with the description. Here I'm pointing to the arm which connects with the star drive wheels and actuates the day and date quick change mechanism respectively. These rotating star wheels that I'm pointing out here are oiled on their riveted stakes, and the arm is put in place and the brass flat-sided screw is turned to lock them in place. Under the plate which sits on top that you just saw there is a third star wheel, and that in turn meshes via the winding pinion on the crown to the other star wheels to actuate the mechanism. At this point I'm just displaying the watch with its dial and hands refitted, and this is to give you an idea of how beautiful this dial is and how it changes according to the direction of the light, which hopefully you can tell from this video clip. And I'm showing it like this because, as you just saw, the crystal that's on the case is very badly scratched, and it does make an enormous difference, as you'll see once the watch is cased up. But this dial is in really good condition. It's a lovely dial, and it's a beautifully clean dial. You can see also there we've got the seconds hand sweeping away very nicely. And here on the back side, I'm just showing the completely refitted movement, including the circuit boards, the battery, and all the appropriate extra bits and pieces. I believe I was trying to point something out at that point, but I cannot remember what I'd said. Here I'm just making a note of the little cutaway in the movement ring where my brass tweezers are, just there. And this is designed so that you can, should you need to, you can actually get a small thin device down in that gap to allow you to press the setting lever. You'll see the tail of the setting lever just pop out as I pull the crown out there, and you can actually get something down there to press the setting lever to pull out the crown. However, the casing ring itself lifts out very easily, so I'm not really sure of the logic and reasoning behind that, but that's why that little cutaway notch is there. And at this point I'm just giving everything a good blow with the air duster before I refit the case back, and we'll flip that over and you can see what I mean about how the dial really does make an enormous difference to how the crystal being scratched rather makes an enormous difference to how the dial looks. So once this case has been cleaned up, once it's gone back to Alan and the case is cleaned up and he's refitted a new crystal, we'll have a really nice looking Elnix. And that has now actually been packaged up and sent back and is in the process of being prettified. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you in the next video.